I usually try to avoid storing all of my thoughts in my head and letting them float around, soaking in my disgusting brain juices. Catharsis is probably one of the biggest ways that I deal with the woes of life. And as a result, I tend to channel whatever emotions I'm feeling into what I create, whether it's art, music, writing, or whatever. I think it's important that everyone has a creative outlet of some kind. I sometimes eavesdrop on the conversations between the voices in my head, and I write them down so I can create some interesting dialogue between the characters I create. This is my second official devlog for Roseblight. I decided to make another one since the last one I made sort of helped me get some thoughts together. I didn't expect anyone to actually watch the last one that I made, so I guess it's kind of nice to see people interested in what I'm working on. This one's probably going to be a bit shorter than my last one. I'm primarily going to be going over some changes that I've made to the dialogue system and other things that you interact with in the game. Roseblight has a lot of dialogue. Not really like a visual novel worthy amount, but there's a pretty decent amount of reading that needs to be done to fully understand the story. I can't really say for myself whether or not the writing itself is good, but regardless, I like writing characters and the dialogue between them. Especially between, those two. A game that has a lot of dialogue needs a pretty decent dialogue system, though. Dialogue boxes were one of the first things that I added to the game, and in comparison to a lot of other things, it hasn't really changed by much. Because a lot of code in the dialogue system is sort of all over the place, I've been going back and restructuring a lot of how interacting with certain objects and NPCs works, so it's a little more efficient. Because the dialogue system was the first interactable thing that I added to the game, I based a lot of other objects that are interactable on the dialogue system, so it acts sort of like a parent for it. Things like pallet shards, key items, the moped, wooden chests, and a bunch of other things that aren't really dialogue are actually part of the dialogue system. And in hindsight, that probably wasn't the best idea. One of the things that I've done to improve the dialogue system is adding a new interaction parent, and having everything else just sort of branch off of that one instead. All of the things that are based off of the new interactable parent will now have a circle thingy that will fill up when you hold it. So when you interact with something, it doesn't immediately trigger. Anything that's interactable also doesn't overlap with other interactable objects. So hopefully that will prevent any more issues with things getting in your way when you're trying to talk to an NPC or anything like that. Restructuring how interactivity works has also given me some ideas for other things that you can interact with and get player input from, like a keyboard popping up when the game prompts you to type something in, or maybe other puzzles like lockpicking. But I'll have to wait and see. I don't want to overscope anything. Aside from just some basic restructuring of things, I've also been making some general quality of life changes that will hopefully enhance the gameplay in the future. One of the things that you can do now is you can sell items at shops. Not most items, though. When you go to a shop and you want to purchase an item or a couple other things, you can press the up or down arrow to increase or decrease the amount of things you want to buy at once. But what you can do now is you can also go down further, and you can basically negative buy items. So in order to sell items, you have to sell them to a shopkeeper who already has that item in stock, and they'll basically pay for more of it. The amount of money that you get from selling an item is equal to the amount that you can buy it for, so you don't have to worry about getting scammed when selling something. I guess that also means you can sort of get a direct refund if you accidentally buy too much of something. I figured this was sort of the best way to add an option to sell items instead of adding a completely different system on top of an already existing system, since that just kind of seems like a lot of unnecessary work. Hopefully, having the option to sell certain items will free up some space in the inventory and can give an excuse to add more shopkeepers or possibly add more valuable items dropped by certain enemies. One thing you can also do now is you can remove anyone from your party. One of the issues that I've been facing recently is other party members sort of getting in the way when I try to interact with certain objects, or when I try to kill an enemy I'm trying to observe for the Wikipedia. It's starting to get a little frustrating, and if it's bothering me, it's definitely going to bother other players in the future. So I've added the option for the player to kick any party member off the team so they don't have to deal with them, including story important characters like Blight or Marmot. I think I'll also add the option to summon certain party members while you're talking to Saven, so that way you don't have to worry about having to backtrack to a certain point to re-recruit them. All of this sort of seems like it's a lot of work, but I think it's important to have a system like this so that it's easier to add more playable characters in the future if I want to, or so that it's easier to manage the players that currently exist in the game. With all of these improvements to systems that are currently in the game, I think things are starting to shape up, yet I still feel like I have a lot of work to do. I think I'm at a point where I can start working on new areas, and hopefully I'll start showing those off more in the future. I've already started working on an area that leads out of Griswell, but I think I'm going to hold off on showing that right now. I'm glad I'm giving myself an opportunity to just sort of sit down and talk about the game that I'm working on. And hopefully these videos are helping people who are interested in my game keep up with what I'm working on and sort of understand it more. That's all I have for today. Make sure to like and smash that subscribe button for more content and updates from yours truly. Thank you for accompanying me on my descent into madness.